We all go through the struggle, though, of figuring out who we really are.
If the enemy can get us to morph into a person who now looks in the part on the outside, what Andy Kamitsky refers to that as is the good false self.
Nobody likes to become undone in front of a group of other people. But, if it's going to have to be a safe place for you to be able to even consider doing that.
There's a way in which we as men can be that idea of that Andy talks about of salience, right?
Yes.
The true masculine is salient. It's both strong and tender.
The social saint has to die.
You don't have all the credentials of, you haven't gone to the Ivy League schools. You haven't, you don't have all of that, but you have the real street creds.
That was the beauty of Living Waters in my early days. Any of these ministries in the early days, I needed guys. The guys coming out of same-sex attraction, LGBTQ stuff, they were gentle. They were say more effeminate. Let's just say, I'm not trying to be derogatory in any way, but because they were, it was safe for me to be honest about my fears and my pain. See, my world that I came out of, you don't talk about that. You don't cry. You don't, feelings are to be killed. You don't keep them. And so when I came into this, I so needed these guys, and it was like this mutual thing that was going on. They were giving me a safe place, and I was giving them a safe place from a guy they thought was never going to be safe. Mm-hmm. And, that's right. And my people weren't safe to me. I had to come to them for safety. So
that's a great, I mean, so often, think about this, whether it's in business or even as pastors running churches, like how many baptisms did you have last month? How many people got saved? How many, what's the size of your congregation? All of these ways in which we are measuring each other up and trying to kind of one up the other in order to feel like there's something of worth in me. It's kind of, the king of the hill scenario, but it's actually a gift from God to pluck us out of some of those places and put us into a place of where everybody is in abject brokenness and they know it. That's one of the things I loved about Exodus International from years ago, when that was once a healthy organization, and it's not even around anymore, but when it was once a beautiful and healthy organization for several decades before it turned at the end. But man, being in worship with 700, 800, 900 people coming who come out of that world and are pursuing Jesus, and there is a crying out, and there is an abandonment in worship, and a desperation for the Lord that reminds me. I mean, it's not the same thing as this at all, but it reminds me of the woman who is willing with the issue of blood, who is willing to move her way through the crowd and touch the hem of his garment. I mean, she was absolutely desperate, and I that is one of the things about those who come out of that world who are pursuing Jesus, is there's a real sense of desperation. And I'm hearing that in you as well. And when these worlds kind of meet and collide, that desperation does really put us on the same ground before the cross.
Yes. There's a level playing field.
Yeah.
And, nobody likes to become undone in front of a group of other people.
Right.
But, if it's going to have to be a safe place for you to be able to even consider doing that.
Yep.
And these ministries, PCM, NPC, it is now, Desert Stream, Clay McLean Ministries, all of these ministries, and I've been involved with all of them at different levels. They gave that safe spot, that place where it was a level playing field. All of us just wanted more of Jesus. All of us just wanted to be more of who he said we were, who he says, this is who you are. This is how I've created you, and we all go through the struggle, though, of figuring out who we really are. And I did. I mean, it was so classic in a way, I guess, but as I was going through these early years of this ministry, I've always been kind of a redneck. I mean, I'm sitting here in a flannel shirt, and I love to hunt deer and football and bourbon by the fire. I mean, that's. But I went through a phase of a couple of 3 years where I thought I needed to be this businessman, and I needed to dress appropriately, and I needed to carry myself, and I needed to have this language, and and all of this, and it was nothing more than another caricature. See, the original caricature I had of this monster bodybuilding guy who has the world by the tail, while I'm a scared little boy inside. Well, now I just put on this businessman's caricature that again was not who I was. And so, it took probably about 5 or 6 years all total to just finally for it all to settle out and me to be okay wearing a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt. Or if I need to put on a sport coat, I can put one on and feel comfortable in that too.
Right.
But it was so odd just to figure out, who am I really, and I prayed that all the time. Lord, I need you to show me what masculinity is meant to look like on me. That was a daily, if not multiple times a day prayer for years. Show me what masculinity is meant to look like on me. How am I to reflect the image of God here on this earth in my male body? How am I meant to do that?
So good. And I, backing up just a little bit to what you were saying a moment ago, it just reminds me that I think there are so many people in the church who have broken free of particular like past behaviors that are addictive or egregiously sinful, whatever. But I think where the enemy can come in ways that we're not expecting is that oftentimes those past behaviors can morph, or we're kind of like the enemy is happy for us to put on a new pair of clothing. Like you were talking about, hey, I kind of had this phase where I thought I would be this businessman. I think people come into the church and they clean up in an outer way, or they learn the lingo. They learn how to speak the Christianese. They go to small groups. They might go to men's group or women's group or whatever. They're there on Sundays. Maybe they start tithing. There's different markers, but on the inside, if the enemy can get us to morph into a person who now looks in the part on the outside, and then what I learned from Living Waters, and I know you have too, and maybe from even some of these other groups that you've been involved in, what Andy Kamitsky refers to that as is the good false self, is this idea that we've put on now this outer exterior, which I think is in some ways I think it is much harder to repent of and much harder to recognize the error of it because it looks right. It has a veneer of religiosity. Yes. It has a veneer of Christianity to it, but yet it's missing the actual life of Christianity. We're still living as little boys and little girls, hiding our secrets, hiding ourselves from people. And it's not until we're willing to allow the Lord to strip it all away and to be really fully known. That's why I'm so big on bands of brothers, bands of sisters, which I learned so much of in the small groups of Living Waters, but so big on those small groups of people that we absolutely have to be fully known in order to experience the power and the grace of God in a particular way through that willingness to humble ourselves and simply be who we are, the good, the bad, the ugly, as we're moving toward Jesus. We're not going to sit in the ugly and stay there, but this is who I am right now. This is what I've wrestled with. This is where I've been, what I've been through, what's been done to me. I want to move to the cross, but I can't do that really. I can look religious and I can get all kinds of accolades. Maybe I can ascend into the pulpit and leading multiple churches and associate, whatever. But I'm still broken on the inside because I'm pretending to be something that I'm not actually.
Right. One is another saying that I've heard, and I like it, is that the social saint has to die.
Yes.
And the fact is that all the horrible things that I did in my life that I took on and I did. Nobody did them to me. I made those decisions. And there are many things there that are pretty awful in my current view of life. Mm-hmm. And I'm not proud of them. But the fact that I can receive the forgiveness of Jesus in those places of my life, and then can actually have empathy for that broken little boy that was committing those acts in an attempt to be a man, and to forgive myself, to come into the reality of, I can say what I want to say, but reality is I did that. There was something in me that wanted to do that.
Yep.
And that's the truth. And to hide that is to be disingenuous. And people need to know that yeah, I was a mess. And that was one of the first things I learned in PCM and Desert Stream. Is the leadership is transparent. We are incredibly honest about who we are and what we've come out of. And we don't have to give super crazy, intimate details about things. Right. But we give enough that you can understand what it was.
We're specific.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, it's specific enough without the crazy details. And yet we're standing here saying God met me in that place when I was willing to say, pull back the veil over my heart and say, Lord, this is the reality of who I am. This is the reality of how I think. This is the reality of my desires. And you know what? I even desire to do that more than I desire you right now, Lord. That's just honest. And when we can do that, he meets us in that place. He is so ready for us to be there because that's honest. That's real. And he doesn't play games. The Lord Jesus is honest and straightforward, at all times. He never minces words. He's never abusive, but he doesn't ever mince words with us.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned this earlier, but I just want to take a moment and kind of highlight this. We've talked about several organizations. So Desert Stream Ministries, which can be found simply at desertstream.org. That's the ministry name. That's the website for Desert Stream Ministries is desertstream.org. And on that site, there's a lot of information about a lot of different things, but there's information about their flagship program, which is called Living Waters, not to be confused with, there's a Living Waters ministry as well that's totally separate. But the Living Waters program, you can find it at desertstream.org. And then you talk when Leanne Payne, she lived until, I think her late 80s, maybe into her early 90s. But when she passed away, the baton shifted, or the ministry shifted from pastoral care ministry to, is it Ministry of Pastoral Care?
Yes.
Okay, so a little bit of a different, and that's been handed off now to some others who are leading that, but still very active. And what is the website information for that? Do you know?
I believe it's ministriesofpastoralcare.org.
Okay. So either way, you can Google.
Yeah, you Google Ministries of Pastoral Care is going to come up.
Yep, and we'll try to also put that here in the notes area for those that are viewing this at least. And then you mentioned also Clay McLean's organization. What is that?
Clay McLean Ministries. .com. ClayMcLeanMinistries.com. He no longer does schools and full, conferences and what have you, but he puts out newsletters and what have you every month. He does one-on-one counseling by phone, in person, all the time. Clay and I are best friends, really, and he's been a huge resource for me over the years. He's a Hebrew and Greek scholar and really dives into that stuff, and so he's really a great one to unpack.
That's a great one to have as a friend. You can be like, "Hey, Clay, what is this word? Can you unpack this for me a little bit?"
Yeah.
So I want to I know that we've kind of come full circle in terms of your story, but of course we in some sense, but yet there's a lot of detail in the later years of your life from the time that you were at your first PCM. What's kind of pick up the story a little bit and fill in some of the gaps there. You're married, you have kids, you got grandkids. I mean, tell us a little bit more about your life.
Yeah, so it was about 3 years into walking out my healing and with Desert Stream and PCM and what have you, working with Clay McLean as well. About 3 years in, I moved to Florida to get married. A girl I had met at a Living Waters training in California, and it ended up that didn't work out. And so we ended the relationship, but I liked Florida, so I stayed. And the church I was in was planning a new church. I went with that. And my current wife, was attending there. She was a recent divorcee with 2 children, a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. And we I thought she was beautiful, and I was fascinated by her. But I was kind of in a place where I really didn't want another relationship. I was and she was beautiful. So that was another, almost like a bad thing, even though I was very attractive. It's like, no, the prettier they are, the more trouble they are, almost kind of. And so, but one day we came face to face in church, and it was either speak or be rude. And, so I spoke, and, it was, it was one of the fastest probably romances anybody's ever heard of. We met, we went out a month later on our first date. We were engaged a month after that, and we were married 2 months after that.
Wow.
So 6 months total of having met to we were married. And now we will be married 30 years next month.
That's awesome. Well, my parents have you beat. They married 2 months after meeting. So you got the 2 month thing in there, but you almost have them beat. But yeah, their marriage survived 68 years by the time my dad passed away at 88 and went home to be with the Lord. But yep. So not the kind of thing I'm usually running around recommending people do 2 months after they meet or what have you. But it worked for you, and God saw you through it. So
it did, and it was what I learned, and the skills that I learned of being honest before the Lord, and continuing my own growth, never feeling like I've arrived, but I am always working on, who am I meant to be, Lord? What are you talking to me about now in my life? And I've imparted that to my wife. We both live in that place. And we have our difficulties. Sure, we have. But now our kids, and they are my kids, they call me Dad. And so my son turns 40. He turns 40 Thursday, actually. And and my daughter is 37. Each of them have 2 children, so I've got 4 grandkids, and it's just awesome. Life is great with these babies. I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and then a 5-year-old and a 10-month-old grandbaby.
That's so great. I just love the way that God redeems, right? I mean, how he sets us on the rock of Christ and really redeems our lives and sets something in motion for generations. We can do that negatively, but we can also do that positively and really cooperate with God in that process, which of course he blesses, to so many more generations for those that follow him and love him. The other thing I was thinking about, Tom, when we were talking the other day, we were talking about how you've been involved in a lot lately in the last, you've been involved in ministry. Anybody listening to you've been involved for your own need, which is where I entered Living Waters too. And so did my wife, Melissa. And then that turned around to beginning to offer that and to be a regional coordinator and group leader and those kind of things for Living Waters. And we've done that for so many years. You've done that as well. And you've been a regional coordinator with them. But now you've also been involved in other ministries, Clay's ministry and some others, and just continuing to pour out. God's moved in so many powerful ways in you. I've observed it. I've been a recipient of it as well, the benefits of it. But it seems like in the last, 2, 3, maybe more years, it seems like you're getting drawn into even more ministry. So where some people might be thinking, well, I kind of I'm getting older and I need to kind of back this truck up a little bit, slow things down a little bit. But you're actually, and I believe God is the one accelerating the gas in this. You're doing more with ministry and also trying to establish a way in which you can do ministry where some other investments, some other things that you're financially kind of covered and cared for. So rather than like even being employed by a ministry where you might work for them or do whatever, you want to be, it seems like you want to have the freedom to be able to bring yourself to travel and to speak even internationally at different events and be available through the funding which God provides through different investments he's led you in. So that's saying a lot, but is that something, I just love that mindset of I want to be used, I want to be used right up into the day the Lord takes me home and be used powerfully in people's lives. But at the same time, in addition to that, to think creatively and prayerfully about how can I be an asset and be involved in what others are doing, what God is. I think of the Henry Blackaby, see where God is moving and join him there. I want to join him there, but I also want to be able to bring the funding that supports me joining him there. Can you talk to those pieces?
Sure. So I just retired a little over a year ago from the fire department here in Virginia Beach. I was 20 years on the department there. And I retired in large part because I wanted to do more ministry. I've been doing it, as you already mentioned, for 30 years, and but I wanted to do more, and I felt like I have more to offer. And the fire department was kind of a hindrance because I had to get leave, I had to get people to work for me, and I can't set when other people are doing conferences. I'm being asked to come do things on these dates, and so anyway, I retired, and yes, I've been traveling now with Desert Stream for the last 5 years. Been going overseas a fair amount, and I've primarily so far I've been to India on several occasions with them. I've been to Thailand on several occasions. I've been to the Philippines numerous times, and so I do that with Desert Stream. I'm also now working with MPC, Ministries of Pastoral Care, and I travel with them as well. Both overseas. I'm not going to be able to go here. They're doing a few things at the first of next year, and I can't go with them. But I will be doing other things with them in Korea and what have you. They have some things going on. And then as well, I've been invited a couple of 3 times this past year to come as an individual. I was invited to come out to Oklahoma City and to help lead a 3-day conference there. And then also in the Philippines, the ministry leader over there, a guy named Benji Cruz, actually reached out to me. We've known him. I know you know him as well.
Yes.
But I've known Benji now for 10 years, 12 years. And he just reached out and said, Tom, I want you to come and do a conference here. I want you to come and lead something for me. So we talked, and so I went over and did a 3-day men's retreat for him and his men, and we had about 32, 33 guys total.
So great.
So it was a great conference, great weekend. And what was fantastic is that we actually had a gentleman there who had been transitioning, and the Lord got a hold of him, and he came back. And this was his first Christian event to come to. And he came still as a woman. Matter of fact, I thought it was a woman. I did not realize. And we were breaking up to do small group stuff. And I said, Benji, I said, this isn't going to work. Sending this lady into one of the small groups because he had assigned them. And he goes, oh, that's not a woman, Tom. That's a guy. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're kidding. But he was so hungry, and he really did pursue the Lord, and had some really good ministries. Anyway, I just loved that this guy came and spent that weekend with a bunch of straight guys, as well as some guys coming out of same-sex attraction,
right? And desperation, right?
Yeah. Huge courage of this guy to come and do this. And he expected to be made fun of. He said so, and he was not. These guys welcomed him and loved on him the whole weekend. Yeah, and so it was
I don't
beautiful.
know you might not know what has happened with his life since, but those kind of events have the power to utterly, utterly transform a person's life.
Yeah. I don't know where he's at at all. But so anyway, I went and did that. Yep. And then Benji also had me do some training for his local team. And so how to lead small groups, how to listen how to listen and engage with participants, how to hear from the Lord on behalf of the participants, and that kind of a thing. So I did that for a group of, 60 or 70 people. That was kind of an interesting thing to do that like that with that big of a group. And then they had asked me to go to another part of the Philippines and do some small group training stuff with another group there with Living Waters. So I went and did that, and we're going back again next year. And then as well, this is really kind of interesting. I was asked to come to Nairobi in Africa and to help facilitate and lead a marriage conference for Pentecostal pastors that were there, for evangelical pastors that were there. But they wanted me to come and teach on the Catholic theology of the body material. Crazy.
Right, because you're not Catholic. I mean, there's so many. Right. So, but we have dear Catholic friends, brothers and sisters who love Jesus, and so anyway, that's awesome. I wanted you to share a little bit about that, just so our listeners, our audience, just has a little bit of a you're an everyday kind of dude. You're awesome in so many ways, but one of the things that I think the Lord is using you so powerfully is because you don't have all the credentials of, you haven't gone to the Ivy League schools. You haven't, you don't have all of that, but you have the real street creds. You have the credits in terms of surrendering your life, seeking the Lord in desperation, and allowing Him to turn you back around to be one who is now feeding and being an instrument in God's hands to feed and to minister and to bring healing to those who are hurting and broken, not just nationally here, but internationally. So I love that, and I just want people to hear that, to get a glimpse of that's not going to be everyone's call, but certainly it is our call to stay engaged in the kingdom and to seek ways that we can become more involved in the kingdom as God wants to bring us into that involvement until the day we go home to be with Him. So I love what you're doing there. The last thing I kind of want to, in a wrap up here, is I would love for you, Tom, just to share, and this isn't anything we've talked about in advance or anything, but it just comes to my mind. I would love for you to share where your heart is at with regard to average churchmen, average guys going to church, single dudes, married guys who do have some kind of a heart for Jesus and want more of Him, and yet everything just kind of career, family, marriage, kids, just kind of can so sap and kind of swallow up attention. But for these guys who are in church, who may feel like, A, they don't really have anything to offer, and B, if you knew what I was dealing with in private, you wouldn't want me offering anything in your church. I think that's where so many, the vast majority of Christian men are at, is in some way on those in that area. What is kind of your heart? And it's fine to take some time at this, but what is your heart for Christian men? What would you want to communicate to them if you're trying to cast vision into a men's group, or you want to be used by the Lord to ignite a fire of hope and passion and vision for their future?
I honestly, this is something. It's interesting you asked, because this is a subject that's kind of heavy on my heart. Because I do feel like the average man in church has been forgotten. They come in, they hear these sermons, and but nobody ever talks about, like you just said, what's the reality of how I think? What am I doing when my wife and kids go to bed at night? If they knew what I went and looked at on my computer, if they knew how I think throughout the course of the day. But what's happened is that, and we've touched on this a little bit, but there's just this kind of I don't know how to say it right, but a religious covering that seems to be over the idea of what does it mean to be Christian. And we have this sense that I really don't have anything to offer. I can't really be a good Christian, but I got to go to church and put on a face for my wife and my kids. And they do. I got a guy right now that I'm talking with who's 24-year marriage is ending. And it's ending because he got found out that he was into pornography and masturbation, and never acted out physically with anybody, but he was into that. And it devastated his wife to such an extent, who frankly and honestly doesn't understand what forgiveness is, doesn't understand, how to walk that out. And she just simply can't even tolerate his presence, because she now knows this thing about him, and they've been married for 24 years. And so they're splitting because she can't bend at all. She won't meet him even halfway. He can't win, even though he's owned it. He's honest. He's full of integrity about it. And he's not trying to dismiss. He's not trying to explain it away. This is what was going on. It's been a part of my life since I was like 10 years old, and nobody ever knew. And I couldn't tell anybody. Right. Why do we have men in church that can't tell anybody that this is what goes on for them. And you never know who you're sitting beside. You just never
That's
know
so true.
who you're sitting beside in church and what they might be struggling with. We sit there and think we are the most messed up person in this church. I don't have any business being here. If we only knew what the other person was doing. But these men, see, and we've also, I think, emasculated masculinity in general. And Christian men, it's almost like they don't go together. It's like two words that can't intersect: Christian and manhood, because it's this idea of turn the other cheek at every turn. You can't be angry, you can't cuss, you can't. We have this list of things that a Christian man should never do, and if he does, then people are aghast at it. Instead of looking around and going, "Hey, man, what's really happening? Talk to me. I just saw this happen in you. What's going on?"
Yeah.
I want to help you, man. That's not the healthiest thing. Can we talk sometime? Can we, instead, there's just this wall that sits there, and that men will not buy. And see, men, we're worse than the ladies, I think, in comparing ourselves.
That's a great point. Keep going.
We really are. We look around at these other guys, like we talked about. On the exterior, everybody would have thought I had it all going on. When I was the most broken, I was at the epitome of my brokenness, and it was at the epitome of looking like the guy that has it all. And yet I was a total mess. And now, I'm much better spiritually, emotionally. I can meet with my children, my grandchildren, my wife. I'm able to be there empathetically, be present to them and their needs, and can lay my own needs aside. There's another thing right there. How many men understand, really and truly think about how courageous and how strong of a man you have to be to lay down your life for your wife and children.
Right.
And what does that even mean? It doesn't mean take the garbage out.
That's right.
It's so much more than that. And it's giving up, maybe giving up going out with the fellas on a Friday night because your wife had a hard week. I don't care that this is your thing that you do every Friday night. Well, I'm going to go. No, you stay home with her, and you tell the guys you'll see them next week, maybe, if my wife is doing okay by then.
Yeah, where's your priority, basically, and where's your heart at? Again, is it really where your treasure is? Jesus says there your heart will be also, and of course, he's speaking about the kingdom of God, which is paramount. But if our treasure really is in heaven, then that definitely connects. That definitely connects with our children and desiring to see them there. It also connects with how are we husbanding our wife? How are we loving her, nurturing her, caring for her, covering her? There's those questions are so important. I want to just back up quickly to what you're describing about this individual, and yes, I've seen those situations as well where a husband or a wife is just so offended at something that's been going on from the time that the other person, like you said, was 10 years old or 12 years old or 8 or whatever, and they've been battling pornography or battling something for all of this time, and maybe in some ways getting some victory, but not for very long, and so I believe we should be talking about these things to our potential spouse before we get married, and that we are honest in confessing this so that they know what they're saying I do too. But I've also seen, and so I think that we can be so unforgiving, and so there's a form of self-righteousness, I think, in what you described, where I am so good, and I'm not perfect, I know that, but I'm so good, but I can't bear the fact that you have this secret thing that's now out in the open, and I'm unwilling to forgive you. I'm unwilling to even come to the table to talk about what that could even look like. I've definitely seen those scenarios, but I've also seen the opposite, where a spouse, I've seen this happen more often than not, actually, where the spouse who's been offended, or the spouse who finds out years later, after their marriage, maybe decades in, that this person has some really huge sexual brokenness issues, whether it's same-sex attraction that they didn't know about, or it's a pornography addiction of some kind, or some sort of fetish or whatever in that arena. And I see more often than not that other person wanting to come to the table and see their marriage healed, and see this person put on a track toward genuine repentance and wholeness. And of course, it's beautiful when you see that actually happening. And a number of years down the road, it's like this marriage. It isn't salvaged. It's made better than it ever was, because now everything that was in the darkness is in the light, and they're walking with one another in a way that is deepened their relationship only by the power of God. But I've also seen those situations where the person who's caught up in the thing, whatever that is, manipulates and has no real intention toward repentance. They may boo-hoo a good game, but they're not really repentant, and that is borne out in the ways that they are behaving and manipulating and lying and deceiving. And oftentimes I've seen that happen over and over and over again, where the other person has become an enabler. And so we see it, and I know you have too, in all the ministry stuff you've done. We've seen the whole gamut, so it's not just that, a person hardens their heart and they're unwilling to forgive. That certainly happens, sadly, and you're talking about that in your example. But we've also seen where the abuser or the offender is manipulating and kind of playing the game, basically, and leading this person on, sometimes for years. And so how beautiful it is when we actually can see the person, the marriage healed, as I said, and things set right. So I don't want to I love what you described about men, that they've been forgotten. One of the things I love about the church that Melissa and I attend and go to is that the founder of this church a number of years ago, he saw the statistic, heard the statistic that talks about how many people, when a child is saved, how many in that family come to know Jesus. When a mom is saved, or a woman, a wife, how many people in that family come to Jesus? Those are significant. Those are important. But when a man or when a husband comes to the Lord, a father comes to the Lord, the percentage of the whole family coming to Jesus, the numbers just go through the roof. And so he realized early on, look, we need to. Many churches are built around for women and for more of the feminine. Not all, of course, but there can tend to be some leaning in that direction. Honestly, I understand sometimes why that is, because so often women tend to be more spiritually attuned and the first ones to the starting line and the first ones to step into something when there's a need. And a lot of times we as guys are holding back. And so there's a gap, there's a vacuum. And so often women are stepping into that space. That's a conversation for a whole other topic that we're not going to get into. But I love the fact that our founding pastor saw the need to orient the church, the way that the church is designed and set up to help men be comfortable in the space, to be inviting, that everything about the church was really designed with that in mind. It's beautiful for anyone, man or woman, but it's the way that it's established, the way that they did worship for a long time, it was really established to be a draw toward guys, to invite them into singing. The notes aren't, the notes are adjusted to be able to accommodate more of, more typical male voice than kind of high soprano female. There's all kinds of things that they looked at trying to adjust to invite men in. Of course, it's so much more than that. It's emotional and spiritual. But anyway, I love that there was such intentionality about that. And we do tend to see, and again, our connection through Living Waters talks so much about this, the misandry, the devaluing and the hatred of the masculine, and the misogyny, the devaluing and the hatred of the feminine, that so often those two polar realities kind of swing back and forth, the pendulum between those in the culture, where there's a backlash on men because of their abuse of or passivity with regard to women, and there's a backlash again against men for that. I think we've been in a season of that, but frankly, I think we're in a season of just in many ways devaluing one another as male and female. We
Absolutely.
devalue one another as men to men, as women to women, and as one another. And of course, part of what Jesus died to bring us into was a unity that knows and learns how to really bless the image of God in the other as a brother in Christ, to draw out the good of that masculine soul and frame that God put within you to be a mirror of him, to draw that out, to welcome that out. And that's one of the things I love about you, Tom. I think you are so good at doing that, and just your presence, your comfortability with yourself and people's emotions or lack of it. You're just a good and solid, stable place for brothers, for men in Christ to learn how to thaw and to learn how to feel, to learn how to experience stuff they've never experienced before. And I just think we need to get a lot better in the body of Christ as men and as women in just giving the gift of our presence and inviting people out of their shadows, out of their darkness, and into the light to experience true healing.
Yeah, no, you're right. And there's subtleties to the church environment, like you're talking about, that it just is set up for the women and for children. And we really don't have that. My pastor is pretty good about some things too. He was a wrestler in high school himself. His son wrestled in high school. He's an adult now. His son was also a UFC fighter. And so he was called the pastor of disaster, was his name in the ring.
There you go.
So my point is that these guys, neither one of them are big guys or anything. They're not intimidating, but they're fully masculine, and his son, here he is, a UFC fighter, and he's a ballroom dancer. You should watch him. Seeing him dance with his wife is magical, the two of them together,
That's so cool.
and I look at that sometimes, and I've seen both worlds, and it just like they don't really fit together, but yet he carries this, and really does a good job of it. But one quick story I wanted to say, when my pastor's son was in high school, he had a wrestling match, and he wrestled this guy. I think it was his same weight class, this particular event, but he wrestled this guy, and the guy beat him pretty quick. And Preston was just furious. He couldn't believe he lost like that, because he was a pretty good wrestler. And so they're in the locker room, and Preston's slamming lockers, kicking and punching and carrying on. And my pastor, Rick, looked at him and said, "What are you doing? You just stop." And Preston's like, "What do you mean? I can't believe it." And Rick just looked at him and said, "He was better than you tonight. It's that simple. He was better than you. Now we know what he's going to do. We know what his moves are. We're going to go home and we're going to train, and you'll beat him the next time. But get over this crap, because he was better than you tonight. Own it and move on."
Good dad.
And that's a great dad, not going, "I know, son, I'm so sorry." And I mean, no, don't let him throw a temper tantrum. He wasn't good enough tonight. He missed the mark, in this sense. And now we're going to go train to be better. But that's guys. That's the way you deal with guys, and to call them out in that sense. I tell guys all the time that God, look, your size doesn't make you a man. Your hair doesn't make you a man. Your clothes doesn't make you a man. You need to be before the Lord, your God, and ask him, who do you say I am as a man, Lord? It has nothing to do. Every one of these men is absolutely unique. There will never be another Tom Wright. There will never be another Garry Ingraham. There will never be another, name him. You were uniquely designed and created to reflect masculinity to this earth. And get busy about being before the Lord on what that means for you and how you're supposed to do it. Quit looking around and comparing yourself to the other guy. Just get before the Lord and begin to walk this out of who you're meant to be. And I mean, if I had to boil it down, that's about as simple as I can make it.
Okay. I love it. Yeah. I mean, I really feel like there's a renovation that's needed within who we are as men, and the capacity, like what you were talking about with the dynamic in the locker room. That situation called for him to be really clear, really direct, put a call before him, knock it off. Your attitude stinks. You're overreacting to this. This is the reality of it. If there had been an appropriate, nobody loses something. They're like, oh, this is wonderful. Like as if they won something. But I think a father in that situation can come alongside and be empathetic and encouraging when there's an appropriate kind of, man, and you want to build him up and you want to, hey, we're going to go home and practice up. But there's a way in which we as men can be that idea of that Andy talks about of salience, right? The true masculine is salient. It's both strong and tender, and the ability to do that and to do either of those is something we need to grow into as men. One of the things that we love about what Andy Kaminsky talks about in the Living Waters training and in the Living Waters program is this word called this salience word, and what he means by that is especially when it's applied to a father, is that fathers who are salient have learned how to be both tender and strong, and that's so needed in our culture where it seems like men either tend toward aggression or they tend toward passivity. And yet biblical manhood, whether that's fathers or husbands, or it's a single man just simply caring about those around him, that need for masculine salience of strength and tenderness is so critical in our culture and in our churches and in our homes. And so I love that Andy talks about that particular topic with such clarity.
Yeah, I have something comes to my mind as you talk about that. When my son was, I don't know, 14 or 15, maybe, he gave us a lot of problems. He was all boy, and he was old enough when his mother and his father divorced that it did have a profound effect. He was 10, and so he's rolling into it. He also went into puberty a little earlier than normal. I think he was probably entering it right about when we got married, 10, 11. So he entered kind of early. So he needed this father's presence, and his father was out of the picture. We actually moved out of the state, so they had a lot of separation there. So all that gives this backdrop that here he is now, we're 14, 15 years old. He's given us a lot of difficulties and challenging, and I'm, he and I are butting heads a lot, and I'm having to really be before the Lord about handling him and how to do it well and not try to just overpower him with my presence. That's not going to be helpful, and I don't need to dominate his spirit. And to, so I was really before the Lord about how do I navigate this? So we were on the couch one time having a heart to heart, and I don't remember exactly what had happened, but something was going on, and I was having to say, sorry, you're not doing this. This has got to stop, and as the conversation had gone on, there was just a change in him. I sensed the shift in him. And I remember stopping. He was sitting right to my right. And I said, what's going on for you, kiddo? Talk to me for a minute. Get real. Tell me what is happening, because I don't understand why we're having to do this. And he sat there for a minute, and all of a sudden he just let fly. And he's like, I never wanted you in my life. I never asked you to be in my life. You just married my mom, and you moved in, and you took over this house, and you. And he just went for like 10 minutes. And it was a full on gusher, And as he came to a close, he began to sob. And he said, now I could never have a relationship with you because I said all of this. I'll never have anything with you whatsoever. And he's just sobbing, sitting here on the couch. And I just put my arm out, put my arm around him and pulled him in. And I said, no, son, exactly the opposite is true now. I said, you think I didn't know all those things you just said? I've known you feel that way. But now that you've admitted it and you've put it out there, we actually have somewhere to go. We can now deal with this and talk about it. And it's in front of us. I said, I don't love you any less. You didn't tell me anything new.
Yep.
So I said, no, son, we are good. We're better now than we've ever been, and just held on to him and hugged him. And we had great conversation on that night. Now, I would love to tell you that everything turned around and we never had another issue,
Right.
But that wasn't the case. And we did have, and right up until right up until he was probably 20. And he got into some legal problems we had to deal with, and just a lot of different stuff that went on with it. Little chucklehead, but he's a great kid now. He's doing well. He's a father with two, a 5-year-old and a 10-month-old, and great job as a husband. He's a Mr. Mom because his wife works crazy hours. And so, he's doing well. But I remember one time on a Father's Day, we were out for lunch, and there was a saying I had during those days when he was giving us so many problems. He would I just wish you would be my friend just once, just be my friend. And I would just say, son, I want to be your friend, but I have a greater responsibility to be the father in this home than it is to be your friend right now. And he brought that up in this lunch this day. He goes, Dad, when you would say that, it would just make me so mad. I would be so mad. I hated you for saying that. And then he sat back and goes, but I'm beginning to understand what you meant. And he wasn't even married. He was just 21 years old, beginning to get a little bit of a grip on what life was really going to be about for him and what have you. And so, there's that place of I had to be in a challenging spot with him. I had to confront, I had to hold boundaries, and he didn't like it. But then when there was the right moment, I knew how to hold him, and I knew how to pull him in and say, no, I love you, kiddo. I'm so glad you said it.
That's right. And what you're doing in that moment that I think is so critical for us to understand, those listening, you and me as well, even at a deeper level, is you're building attachment with him. You're helping. So he needed to get that poison and that yuck out. You knew it was there, but even if he said some stuff that you didn't even know, you're like, oh crap, but I had no idea, or some things that were really hurtful that totally blindsided you. The fact that it's coming up and out, and he's getting it out, and then there was a turn and a twist. Of course, sometimes kids just vent and scream and then take off, and there's no regret. He had regret, like somehow I blew something with you by saying all of this. I got it up and out, but now it's something's over.
Demonstrated his father hunger. It demonstrated his father hunger. His own father was states away, 1,000 miles away, and I'm what he has.
Yep. So, but he's formed attachment with you, which is, we were all made for attachment. We are all made for healthy attachment. And the more that we as dads can learn to live in that salient space of being strong, but also tender, and being able to be both of those depending on the need of the moment. Sometimes in your situation, it was in the same moment practically, right? It was the same event. But the more that we are able to do that, the more that sons, daughters feel this, they long to be attached to us, but there's something blocking that. Either it's the lack of our attention, it's the feeling that we're not safe, it's a variety of it may be shame in their own lives as well. It could be a number of things, but it's so important, and this is what you're demonstrating, is through that salience, you built attachment over time. And it wasn't, like you said, there were lots of rocky roads, for a number of years, but that attachment built over time, so that there's a fond affection, there's a deep love that you both have for one another that was formed over time, even though you're not his biological father. So I love again how God is able to do that, and we are so in so much need of being able to receive as a son or a daughter in that way. And we also have the capacity, even when we didn't get that as sons and daughters, God gives us the capacity to be able to receive it from him, but also through other brothers who are willing to be open and vulnerable, through those other brothers and sisters, for women, where we are able to learn how to pass on this thing that is so needed, even though we didn't get it naturally from our own biological mom or dad. So It's just a powerful thing. And I just want to say, as we're wrapping up here, that this conversation, hopefully women listening to this conversation are not hearing this as a negative toward women, or that women aren't as important as men. That is not in any way at all what we're saying. We want to see the image of God fully glorified in women. Women bear an equal value of the image of God as a man does, but she bears that in a way that's distinctive, and he bears that in a way that's distinctive. And we want to see both men and women find environments in the church and environments where they can thrive as husbands and wives, as single individuals as well, men before the Lord, women before the Lord, before marriage, as well as being moms and dads, and just being part of the healthy building blocks of a healthy society. So anyway, I'm so grateful, Tom, for your time. It's always good to get time with you. And I just love the fact that you're willing to come on and just spend some time sharing your story, sharing the wisdom that God has given you over these many years and even decades of ministry. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome, Gary. I enjoyed it, and same with you, my friend. I always look forward to running into you at whatever conferences we happen to be at. So, and we always end up usually have at least one good conversation. We don't get a lot of time typically, but we try to slip in one. So, and your wonderful bride, I love her, and your kids. Yep. So always enjoy seeing everybody. So, and please give Melissa my love, please.
I will do that. Pass the same on to Terry. We feel the same way about her. So, hey, friends, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. We're so glad that you're here. I hope that you picked up some things that are both encouraging for you, some things that maybe you can pass on to others. Please let other people know about our podcast, that it's here, that's available. And we have a wide range of discussions on the topic of sex, identity, biblical identity, and certainly relationships and authentic vulnerability. So again, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in a future episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us for this Love and Truth Network podcast. To listen to or view future episodes, please check us out at loveandtruthnetwork.com/podcast. You may also subscribe to Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Google Music. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in a future episode.